today's guest is Paz Arroyo. She's a quality leader at DPR Construction. Paz, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for inviting me, Tats.
So yeah, we had Thomas, your colleague, on the show, and he was very complimentary of your work within the education side of the construction industry.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I enjoy working with Thomas. He's a great colleague. I've learned so much about construction through him too. So he's a great
Yeah,
guy to work with.
yeah, and I did some research, and I noticed that you spent a lot of time thinking, writing, I guess educating on collaboration within construction.
Yes, I definitely do that. Use a lot of time. I've written a lot of papers around this idea of collaboration and making decisions together. I did. I do have a group that I founded with Annette and with Randy. They're all three of us have PhDs, so we we like to philosophize and have conversations about how things are going. But at the same time, we both of, I mean, all three of us also work in construction companies, so we have the practical experience, and I think there's so much to share to with the world, and I see that as um, our contribution to the industry. So it's
Yeah.
really important for
Yeah,
us.
so what are certain things that aren't working, and then we could possibly talk about certain solutions or ideas around
hmm
improvement.
Yeah. So specifically in collaboration, and I mean, when we start with decision making, there's a lot of how things have worked in the past. So if you think about all the bidding process, or when you get selected, and this is really important because traditionally you have to make a bid, especially if you're a public owner in construction. Uh, it's seen like it is transparent to ask three or more people to make a bid, and then you're supposed to choose the cheapest one, and that's the best practice in the industry. And and when you start looking at how those decisions are made, and that's um, I mean, you're using, especially if it's a public owner, you're using money that's from everybody, right? It's money that is our tax money. And this happens all over the world. It's not just the US. I'm from Chile. And as I said, I work with these colleagues that work in Germany and Denmark and have also international experience. So they are, this is a problem that think we're being transparent and efficient when we choose the cheapest thing in construction. And by thing, a it can be a material, it can be a building system, it can be the whole project, the whole design. We try to pick and choose without understanding the consequences of what the values are. And when we don't collaborate, we're just very narrow minded and see certain parts of what is the impact of the project. So, for example, one of the Randy works with tunnels or with big infrastructure projects that we did. You're tracing where a tunnel is going to go through the middle of a big city. There's a lot of stakeholders engaged in that, a lot of different impacts. And if we're just focusing on what's the cheapest thing, we're not going to get the best value for society, the most benefit for the environment and for the users of the infrastructure wherever it is. Same happens in a hospital. If you don't consider, DPR does a lot of hospital projects. If we're not considering how the nurses are working, how the doctors are working, how the patients feel, like how the neighbors are coordinated, and we're just using our tax money to choose the cheapest design, it's not going to be a good result. It's not gonna be the best that that we can give, and it's not gonna be good in the long term. And also, we also most of the times when we think about what's the cheapest, we think on the cheapest short term, not in the cheapest long term. Because if you factor in things like operations and cost of maintaining a building, your decisions can totally shift on what's more important. So there's a lot there. I don't know. Let me know if that's too detailed or if it's coming
No.
across.
So, there's lots of considerations, there's lots of stakeholders. Um, how do you start to get to the point of collaboration? Because everyone has their interests. So how do you bridge that?
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting because you have to you have to create a system where you allow for people to collaborate, to allow for stakeholders to bring their perspectives. And that's not something that we typically do in construction. We it's but we know it can be done. We know there are good um, project examples where you have participation. In Europe for public projects, there's a lot of requirements of participations. Well, here too in the US we have it depends of the state. In Chile, not much. I mean, there's not really a lot of requirement for participation, but it's more like you some owners do it proactively because they know they will find resistance if they don't do that from the beginning. Um, but we we specifically um, have been focusing on our research on understanding how to see these mechanisms, which roles and responsibilities owners, designers, architects, and users have, you know, um, and also looking at the from the lens of even if you have everybody in the room, a lot of these infrastructure projects are going to be living for 50 years or more. So the people that's going to be affected, it's not even alive now. So, and the consequences for the environment are also going to be way beyond our time. So there's moral or an ethical responsibility of putting yourself into somebody else's shoes and think about the future. So, um, so that's really up to us to do that. So there has to be a willingness to collaborate and to try to do this type of collaboration. So that's where a lot of education comes because we're not enforcing that. We don't have the power to say this is how things should work in the world, but we can show it can be done. There are tools out there that can help you, and you can do it in a way that's efficient. We focus a lot on writing about specific lean methodologies and tools that can help you with that. Um, when you think about considering multiple alternatives, not just going with the first design that comes to mind. We talked about set-based design when you explore all the potential uh, alternatives, and with the use of technology, you can do a lot of more exploration
Mm,
uh, way faster that in traditional construction. Um, there's a lot of cultural issues just there on presenting multiple alternatives. That from the architecture um, practice and education, not always you're going to be encouraged to show all your cards. They sometimes are not everybody, of course, but um, there's not a lot of incentives in trying to show multiple designs. Instead, in architecture education, they are taught to defend their design. they're criticized by professors when they do their design studios, and you have to defend your project, and you're typically, making one mock-up and you defend that. You're not showing multiple projects because it seemed like it's going to take longer. But when you look at how, you know, the manufacturing industry or product development um, lean world works, is that you create a lot of different alternatives and you learn from them as fast as you can, and then you commit to something, and then you open again, you explore new designs, and that actually reduces the amount of iteration that happens
Hmm.
in
So
total.
you're
So
you're suggesting using technology to create alternatives and then running cost-effective simulations and collaboration discussions to learn to educate the final choice.
yeah, you can definitely use technology. You can just present alternatives, and then the other thing that we focus a lot is on um, avoiding biases, because we all come with with our own perspectives, thinking of what is important. But when we create the design alternatives, that's where the real trade-offs can be discussed, and that's when we can agree. We can agree, for example, to give you the other big method we've been researching and testing how it works, and proving that it's more effective too than other methods. It's choosing by advantages. So it's this idea of focusing on what are the the differences between the alternatives. So, for example, I had I was helping a project, a hospital project, and they were choosing an HVAC system. And I had uh, the fortune to be there with the doctors, with the nurses, with the mechanical engineer, with the general contractor, trade partner, like, everybody on a big room. And you had all the perspectives, and the mechanical engineer will be thinking about, well, I can give you, I can design whatever you guys want, just tell me what you want. you know the the guys that were in charge of the budget were just looking at the cost. The guys that were in charge of operation were looking at how hard it is to maintain this building. And the nurses, and then one of the nurses speak up and said, well, I don't care about any of that. The most important thing for me is air quality, and how, like, this is a hospital, and this is how people should, I mean, we cannot spread out diseases and stuff. So yes, 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 yes to everybody. All of those things are important. But when you look at the alternatives, actually, it was interesting because there was no difference in terms of air quality. They were all great, because obviously it was a hospital. So that was not the differentiator to make the decision. So you don't have to waste your time discussing of whether maintenance is more important than air quality, or wherever else anybody's um, important. When you actually look at the context and look at the alternatives, and you see the real differences, the advantages, then it's much easier to come to an agreement.
Yeah, so it sounds like exploring wide, understanding different perspectives, prioritizing, and I guess moving forward, right? I guess iterating and trying stuff.
Yeah, it's getting clarity around the trade-offs too. I mean, that's
Mm,
really important. Getting clarity about the trade-offs that are based on the context, that you on the real alternatives you can do. You don't want to agree on what's better in general, because that's no necessity to do that. And that's where a lot of people get scared to include a lot of people, because they do not know how to manage all that information, and how to you know prioritize in the sense that, okay, everybody has opinions, and you're never going to change that. People will have different opinions, but you can see and agree on on what are the performance of things that can be measured, or you can defer to the expert to speak up and say those things so the other people listen to that. So there has to be a structure. It's not like let's get everybody in the room and let's just talk until we, come to an agreement magically. There are mechanisms and tools that you have to implement if you want to be efficient with that.
Yeah, I mean, for those that aren't clear on that, what are some of the mechanisms and tools and stuff like that that people can rely on to create that environment?
Yeah. So in terms of tools, choosing by advantages, that's a important tool to study, and there are several steps. I'm not going to go through all of them, but definitely have multiple alternatives on the table, understand how they perform, each one of them. Then you 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 also have to be explicit on what's valued, what are the criterias, what is preferred about those alternatives, and then you can define advantages based on that criteria. And and then at the end, I mean, after you understand the value and the combined value of those things, you put the money, but the money not just thinking on the first cost but also long-term cost. So um there's a whole process, and I've been super lucky in my career to be in places where this can actually be implemented, and I have seen it working. And it's really really great to see how, you see a group of people that they all come from different places and they all have their own perspectives, and then at the end of like a big decision, uh, they can all understand, yes, I understand this is why we're doing this. Maybe it wasn't my favorite alternative, but I understand why we're moving in that direction, you know.
Yeah, yeah, because you can't make everyone happy, but at least if it's explained, then maybe there's some level of acceptance.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and um there is definitely more acceptance and more, and I've tested this also. This is one of the fun things I did when I after I finished my PhD. I went to Chile, and I was a professor for a couple of years, and I put people in rooms like with different methods, and
Mm,
measure how much time they will take to make decisions and how satisfied they will be with the results and all those things. So it's not just my opinion. I've tested in real people. Uh, so it's really interesting. I mean, I don't think how much in construction projects you cannot, like, it's really hard to test those things because you don't have project A and B, and you cannot let one project go totally wrong and don't do nothing. I mean, don't you just leave them. Oh, you do not know how to, you know.
yeah, you have to.
So
Yeah, yeah. I guess you're right. You can't let it go completely bad.
right, to prove your point, right? You can do that. So uh but in academia, you can do that, and you can, bring practitioners and do experiments and put them in rooms and stuff like that.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, I guess let's say you're part of a construction company and you want to um, make a difference, right?
mhm,
Where would they start? Like, would they approach management? Would they learn themselves? Which sites would they go to? It's a big area, I can see.
mhm.
How do they start to unpack this and try to be effective?
Yeah. I think start for yourself. I mean, there's no other way you can start convincing others if you don't understand what you're trying to do first, and if you're not convinced, there's a better way. So I think educating yourself, it's a big part. And and test with little things. I mean, I wouldn't go for the most difficult, most challenging, decision you have to make as a company or as a project. If you start with inconsequential things and you get some good practice there, and use, yeah, little by little. I don't think uh
Not the biggest
yeah,
project in the company, just some
no, not,
small thing to show proof of concept.
yes, definitely. look for something. That's how I started when I did my. I worked at Gensler as an academic intern when I was doing my PhD, and they let me try some stuff in projects, and I would look, for okay, whatever project was happening there, and I could, and I will look for okay a lot of different because you can question anything, you could say why does the building looks the way it looks, why are we using this structure, why are we picking these materials, why, and I would ask a lot of those questions. I was very annoying, of course, for other people to work with, but then I convinced them to let me try this with very small decisions, so things that wouldn't break the project if they didn't have control over or anything like that.
Yeah.
And so
I mean,
so that's what,
besides
yeah,
selecting a small thing,
yeah,
what tips do you have to persuade people, right? Do you have any things that you've learned to be
yeah,
persuasive and even allowing the smaller trial to occur?
yeah. I mean, there's a couple of questions that, I mean, do you know how you make your decisions? Like, how do you make your decisions? Are you conscious of that? And I mean, I'm happy to talk about that. I always ask like, uh,
Yeah, tell me about that. I mean, that's a very good question because,
mhm,
not every company has a decision-making structure or at the project level.
mhm. Yeah. So typically, I mean, you get blank stares, or you can point out stuff. Okay, why does the building looks like this? And you can pick on things, and they will tell you, I did this on my research. I wasn't here. I don't know. I mean, this was picked by somebody else, or just this is what the owner wanted. I don't know. Or I mean, or and then you can go also in personal, ask them personally how you make decisions. And then the other thing that is important that people don't realize, and this is something that Jim Sure said, that the most important decision you're going to make in your life is the decision on how to make your decisions.
Mm,
So so it's a sort of a
interesting. Well,
meta skill.
do you have an opinion on or insight on what is a productive way to make decisions, or is it more about being intentional?
No, yes, we have insights on how to make decisions. It is about being intentional, but I'm talking about collaborative decisions,
Mhm.
decisions that are consequential, and decisions that you want to, have a process. Um, for example, and the other thing that my other point was that typically you understand that decisions have consequences, right? You understand that it's important. You're making decisions, and your decisions, I mean, where do you work, what do you study, where do you live, do you have kids or not, what, all those things have consequences in your life, but um, we don't necessarily ask ourselves how we made those decisions, or are you aware of how, like we always go for what we felt like. And at a personal level, it's important, but as a society or as a company, when you think, the other good example, it's elections. The way that you choose a president in this country, it's based on a voting system, that it's a method to make a decision, you know and there are certain rules about how you weight those votes, because it's not every single vote it's has the same weight, because it depends of the representation, the state that you have, and that's how things work, you know. So have we ever, and obviously the way that method that you use, if you have the same voting system and you use different methods, you can end up with different candidates being chosen to be presidents, and that has happened in the history of this country. So does it make a difference? It does. That's a very specific example, but I don't know how much people think about that.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. So you talked about sort of the system, but I mean, is it ultimately? are you advocating for consensus, or are you advocating, like, how like you said, on a construction project, how should it be weighed? Should it ultimately be one person that's accountable? Like, what are the parameters we're dealing with?
And I am helping. I'm interested in. I'm not saying every single decision always have to be by consensus because maybe that's impractical. Uh, but if it's a consequential decision where you don't have all the information and you cannot, one person cannot predict all the consequences, and it is an important decision, you should consider a collaborative process, and I think a lot of people, um, first of all, it's not aware they are making decisions that shouldn't be making on their own on a silo. And then if they know they have to make a decision with more people, they're afraid of coming up and saying, I have to involve others, because asking others and not knowing how to manage that, it's like we're not never going to make a decision. We're going to be, always, um, it's going to be chaos. So I'm also at, helping um, people understand how they can do that, and I've done that in a lot of case studies and publications explaining, step by step processes and that sort of thing. But so there's an awareness of, there's a decision that we miss all the time. We make like thousands of decisions, small decisions every day, and there's no way you're going to sit down and write them down. Like, you couldn't function, you couldn't, like, you need to trust your gut too. I mean, it's not that it's one or the other, but there is a differentiation that you have to do. And for obviously big construction projects that involve many people, it will be wise that you consider more perspectives. Um, that's at least my point. So very good questions. You're making me really uh, really think what
Yeah,
the intent is. Mhm.
no, that's great. It's a very interesting topic. Is there anything else that I haven't asked you, but you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I said it, but it's not that. I think one of the problems we have in the industry too is that um, we're not a very diverse industry. And when we talk about making decisions, also, I mean, at DPR, we've been super lucky. We have this bias awareness training that everybody has to go through, and they give us very practical advice on, uh, if you're in a room and you look around and all the people look like you're probably not done a very good job at, including others, right? And when you look at, um, and not including people, for example, if you're not including enough women in the design of a hospital, well, it's not going to be great for women, or if you don't include old people, if you don't include, there's so many different groups and and ways to think about inclusion and diversity. I don't want to make it specific for one group, but you can go through, um, asking yourself, am I in a group in which there is, if everybody agrees, there's probably not, I mean, not a culture of um, expressing your concerns or your opinions in a free way. There's no psychological safety, right? So that's also very important for decision making. And as a leader, um, if you're in the position of making these decisions, you can drive the change. It's not something that um, necessarily the people that is not involved in the decision can change. It's really, I think there's a lot that is that it's in the hands of people that already has the power to make these decisions.
Yeah, very nice. Well, no, very good points. And yeah, I mean, if is there any other information you want to pass on in terms of resources that you have, or things that you want to direct people to?
Yeah, we do have a web page. It's called CollabDecisions. and you can go there. We're publishing our research there. We have it organized somehow by different topics and on decision making methods. On there's a paper we have, on the structure, and roles and responsibilities. That's a new publication that's going to be presented in IGLC, the International Group for Lean Construction. There's an old paper where I talk about rhetoric and decision making too, like how you can use rhetorical tools to connect to this process. There's so much that you can explore. There are a lot of tools that, if you want to start somewhere and educate yourself, or you want to see practical examples, there's a lot of case studies there. We also have some videos from conference presentations and things like that. Um, we're working on a book. We've been working on a book forever, so I hope to have a book someday. I don't know when is that gonna happen, but make it an effort.
Well, it's great. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that Thomas introduced me to you, and thank you for sharing your knowledge.